Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this STARS webinar. This is particularly important in particularly disruptive times. So welcome again. I'm Toni SCHOENENBERGER. I'm the Executive Chairman of STARS. STARS is a global platform for dialogue, and please visit our website for more information on STARS. Now, no doubt, geopolitical, geoeconomic, geotechnological intelligence is a must for any leader in business and society. So today, we are continuing our webinar series. It's the economy stupid. And we have the great privilege today to talk to Jens SCHULTE. Jens, welcome. Great to have you on this webinar session.
Thank you very much, Toni. It's a pleasure.
Jens SCHULTE is a member of the executive board at Deutsche Börse Group in Mainz, Germany. Prior to joining Deutsche Börse, Jens held top positions at ThyssenKrupp, Schott, Hilti, and Siemens. And last but not least, Jens is also a STARS alumnus. Jens, we are very much looking forward to your insights. Now we have 30 minutes to discuss with Jens SCHULTE. If you have any questions, please type in your questions in the Q&A feature, and I would like to encourage you to do it as quickly as possible. So let's start, and I have the privilege to ask the first couple of questions. Now, Jens, no doubt, we live in a kind of Zeitenwende. Geopolitical uncertainty, economic shifts, and technological acceleration converge. In addition, the liberal international order, the so-called rules-based order, comes to an end. What do you think are the three major geopolitical disruptive developments today?
Yes, thank you very much, Toni. And once again, it's a pleasure for me to be here with all of you and looking forward to your questions. So on your first thing, I mean, it's of course always relative what are the most important ones, but for me, I would, pick maybe three. The first one is really everything around global fragmentation and dominance of raison d'etat, so to speak. Yeah? So everything that we are seeing around, trade restrictions, around real wars by now, also partly out of economic interest, and all of these kinds of things. I think that is certainly a development that probably started, I guess, or was accelerated through the Corona period, and now has been further accelerating over the last few years. And of course, that does create quite some level of instability and uncertainty right around the world. It also creates the necessity for all of us to revert to and to build up local sources, and also in our own countries partly. And it also, particularly when I was working on the industrial side, I think it also started to create this notion of, do I at some point in time, need to even decide for, one of the two hemispheres, if you wish, in doing business, because they are becoming increasingly shielded from each other. Yeah? We are not yet there, but that's certainly one of the big shifts, I would say. The second one, from my perspective, is everything really around AI, and also in the context of geopolitics, AI-induced cyber risk. I would think that, I think all of us experienced that, right? I mean, what we've seen and heard over the last few weeks, particularly around Claude, for example, Anthropic Claude, and also Claude Mythos. I mean, there's software that is essentially running monkey tests on software to figure out where there are issues. I think that has a huge impact, right? I mean, it has an impact midterm on society, and we will maybe talk about that a bit later, and the future of work. It also, has quite an impact on security. All of us need to be paranoid about, also corporate security, and it also has many other implications. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, to be quite honest, and here I take the liberty maybe of a personal, something that is personally very important to me, but that somehow gets lost, is the whole notion of climate risk now starting to disappear from global top priorities, right? Because I think climate risk is still there. So that hasn't really changed. If anything, that is also accelerating with very fundamental impacts on humanity and burden for our children and so forth. And I think it's important for us to, basically keep up the narrative. So these would be my three top picks.
Thank you very much. We are coming back to some of them. Turning on to the Middle East, what do you think are the major implications right now for the global economy?
So I think it's actually difficult to say that. I think as we have learned through Corona, many effects will be second and third order effects coming in over time, right? I mean, on a short-term note, I think as long as the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened in due course, again, I think the impact is limited apart from increasing energy costs already. But I think the midterm impact we cannot even see. And if the street will not be opened, I think then we will face dramatic consequences that not many people are aware of. Yeah, I mean, we're always talking about the energy supply out of the region, but what many people don't know is we also have many substances, materials, chemicals, for example, methanol. I mean, the region is responsible for 60% of global methanol supply. If that would dry out entirely, then at some point in time, we don't have anything to drink anymore because we don't have, caps for bottles to close them because they require that material for shaping up. Yeah. So I would say, short answer to your question is I think short term, we will see some inflation going up and interest rates correspondingly going up and the dollar becoming stronger because of energy purchases. But I think the second and third order consequences we can't even fully see yet.
Great. Yes. Maybe turning on to Europe. Geopolitically speaking, I would guess that Europe is really a non-valeur. It may be slightly exaggerated. Economically, there are lots of challenges in a very competitive environment. Just think of the US, think of China. As a corporate leader, as you have been, and as you are, how do you see Europe, and particularly the European Union? What's wrong and what should be done in your view?
So first of all, I'm an optimist, and so I would start with what's right, so to speak, if you allow. So in my view, I mean, at the end of the day, to be quite honest with you, and objectively, Europe has all of the ingredients to be successful, right? I mean, we are a large population, larger than the US. We have very skilled people. We have a long legacy of, scientific and cultural development. So I think the basis is there, and we also have quite some funds. I guess there's a few things that need to happen, though. The first one, talking from my current job, as a stock exchange operator, I think we need to, first of all, be able to mobilize private capital in Europe because that is the major difference to US capital markets, for example. We just don't mobilize private funds. Yeah, we have 17 trillion euros of funds sitting in savings accounts in Europe that are not applied to anything. And rerouting that through better pension systems and making that productive capital to invest in infrastructure and defense and all these kinds of things. I think that's an absolutely prime priority. And the top politicians know that. So our institution, for example, is very close to the chancellor here in the country because he used to be on our supervisory board and he knows that very much. It's just a question of how quickly do you get this through the system. So that's one thing. Second one is really harmonizing capital markets to, have capital flow more freely. And the third one really is, of course, reforming decision making in the union, right? I think that is probably I mean, we have many intelligent people sitting there, but decisions are just coming in much, much too slow. Yeah, it just takes too much time. And it's also partly destructive. So take industrial policy, for example, and antitrust decisions. These not only take a lot of time, they're also often against, European champions building, and there's, many things need to happen. I think the union is aware of that, but let's see how quickly they can mobilize.
There is a question from Bruno Gehrig, who was the former vice chairman of the Swiss National Bank. And perhaps you could deepen just what you said before on the European capital markets. He says these capital markets are on a national basis, relatively illiquid, and do not allow us to make financial progress relative to the US. How long do we wait for an integrated European capital market?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Bruno. Thank you very much for that. So I think one thing is very important to me, if that is your question. So Europe, and probably I don't need to tell you, but European capital market is not about merging stock exchanges, right? I mean, there's been this notion in the press that wouldn't it be great to merge the German and the French stock exchange? It wouldn't solve anything, right? Because exactly as you say, we have fragmented liquidity pools, and even more so, the largest part of liquidity, as you also know, is outside of organized institutions. It's within so-called systemic internalizers, so within banks, for example, and on the OTC market. So that wouldn't do the trick, but absolutely right. Yeah. So we need to come to a point where basic regulation in the EU is more harmonized. So in terms of securities law, for example, trading law and things like that, where supervision is more harmonized. And as I said, a very important ingredient from our perspective is really mobilizing pensions. Yeah. And how long does that take? I think that needs to happen. I think everybody's aware of, and quite frankly, I don't even think that the issue is only on the European level at the moment. We also see, of course, a lot of resistance from within the countries. Yeah, take that example, just very quickly of supervision. There is a European supervisor for markets, right? The ESMA. And now the ESMA is trying to attract further responsibility, which probably could make some sense. But of course, all of the national competent authorities within the respective countries strongly opposed to that because it is directly interfering with their own business model. Yeah, so long story short, we hope that there is good dynamic now. At least, I mean, we know that the German leadership, the French leadership as well, are strongly supporting and pushing this very much. And we hope that within the next 3 or 4 years, something is going to happen here.
Great. Coming back to what you said on climate, there is a question by Stefan Germann. I just read it. What is your view on the urgent need to shift traditional, often extractive investing towards measurable positive impact investing that ensures sustainable positive contribution towards nature, people, and society?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So as I said, this is dear to my heart. I was actually responsible for our zero carbon strategy at one of my previous companies, Schott, which has a CO2 footprint of 3 million tons, so quite a lot. And this is, as I said, very, very strong to my heart, also in terms of building a better future for our children. So the short answer to your question is absolutely. I mean, rechanneling funds into impactful investing, particularly into zero carbon technologies, is extremely important. The issue, as always, is I mean, that zero carbon technologies are well known to humanity. So there is nothing that we need to scientifically reinvent or something. It's very, very easy. It's rather a matter of availability of low cost green hydrogen, among other things, and build out of renewable energy. And my worry about this is that while I think there has been some good focus a few years ago, we have really lost track on that, basically since Corona, right? First of all that, and then the Ukraine war and the Iranian war, and then geopolitics over interfering. It has completely disappeared from public debate, right? And that's not good here. So we somehow need to bring it back, and I hope that politicians pick this up.
Coming back to economics, what are the 3 major economic shifts that you can see?
So I would say, first of all, again, deglobalization is a very important economic shift from my perspective. And in that context, also the continuing rise of Asia. I mean, if you travel to Asia, and I mean, all of us are doing that regularly, then the perspective that you get from there on the world is an entirely different one than what we see here, right? I mean, for them, the Iranian war is maybe an opportunity or something that is happening somewhere, in the middle of the globe, in the way that we look at the globe. But they are entirely focused on their own agendas, right? And so I mean that will, that deglobalization and rebalancing is certainly continuing and has a tremendous impact. Second is, I would also say demographic shift, particularly in the West, is very important. I mean, it's still continuing, right? I mean, we're all getting older. and that has implications and, also for our productivity requirements going forward. And the third one is really AI and digital, in my view, starting to become material in economic value creation, right? Because I mean, so far that is something I think we all have the experience that AI has been hyped a lot, and we all do, proofs of concept type of projects and try to experiment, but nothing really has been scaling so far. I think, in my view, that this is now changing with the newest, both on the generative AI side with respect to using them as sort of co-workers, and also on the more analytical AI side. I think that impact will be fundamental.
Before, you also mentioned the fragmentation, and we are seeing a kind of a fragmentation of the economic and financial systems, actually. Can you elaborate a little bit on a dollar-based and renminbi-based fragmentation?
Yeah, so I have to admit that I'm not a macroeconomist, so we would probably need to ask more competent people on the question what that means for currencies. I think there is this overall narrative that the US dollar as the lead reserve is basically weakening, and I think it's true. What we see, if you look at global flows into currencies and how they develop. There are thousands of theories about that, but we do see that things are being drawn out of the dollar and rather going to maybe renminbi, but also into the euro and other currencies. Yeah, so that probably, it's going to develop into a just mirroring geopolitics. From my view, it's going to develop into a duopoly or multipolar world, and the dollar will still be the most important currency in my hypothesis, but others will increasingly complement that. Yeah.
There is a question from David Baum. Where do you see a chance for stock exchanges in supporting the economic agenda of a government, e.g., in creating an ecosystem around AI champions?
So first of all, I would think that stock exchanges absolutely do play a critical role in organizing capital markets, right? So that's our prime job. And so if you believe in the power of capitalism and capital market, social capitalism, in our case, in capital markets, I think we have a prime role in making sure that capital is flowing freely and companies use that as a proper tool and so forth. In building up an AI ecosystem, I guess the most important thing that we can do is essentially make sure that our own, stock exchange related regulations, for example, when you want to be a listed company and you have reporting requirements, that these hurdles are as low as possible, so to speak, for these kinds of companies, and also work with the political elite, so to speak, in making sure that also, from them, securities laws, for example, are simple enough. Yeah. So, for example, I recently spoke to one of the founders of Celonis. It's probably a company that is well known to many, one of the few 10 billion plus startups in Germany that is applying AI in the area of process mining. And he also said they are in the process of thinking about where to list at some point in time. And they're really looking for some simplifications here, compared to the US to choose Germany. Other than that, what we specifically are doing, in closing up the answer is Deutsche Börse also has a venture arm actually that is investing around between 200 and 400 million euros in total in AI technology and digital technologies that are related to capital market infrastructures. Yeah, so we do that constantly, and so we also with that we try to boost the ecosystem and support it.
There are again a couple of questions from the audience. René Rausenberger is asking the following question. Question on the German economy. What is needed to bring the German economy back on track? Probably that needs 1 hour, probably.
Exactly.
Of an answer.
It probably needs a long time. So to be quite honest, I believe that what needs to be done is fairly common sensual in Germany. So I think it's, also in Germany, we need to mobilize more capital. That is one very important thing. So our German pension system, where we just made a first step, is very important. And then all of the other things that all of you guys very much know, right? I mean, de-bureaucratizing, German regulation on corporates, also some tax incentives. So I think, to be quite honest with you, there is no rocket science behind that. Maybe working on labor law in the one or the other area a bit, but I think everybody is very much aware of that. It's just making sure that it's going through the political machinery. Now, I have to say that that's maybe again a more personal comment, though. While there can be a lot of criticism about the speed of German governments, and also a lot of press coverage on how we are sort of discussing with each other, at least it's a relatively orderly government, right? And it's not neither an extreme right nor left-wing government, which you're increasingly seeing, or government with autocratic characteristics, which you see in many countries. At least there we have the luxury of not having that yet. But flip side is it takes a long time to agree.
But this morning I read at the ZDF barometer, AfD is the strongest party now.
Yeah, fortunately not yet in elections, but it is very strong, right? And I mean that is tying to René's question, because of course, I mean the populations. I mean we are worried about two things. One is how quickly can we renovate, and the other one, of course, I mean the other big development continues to be migration and the effects on society, right? And these are essentially the two angles that the more extremist parties immediately jump on. Yeah, and the only thing that the government can do is really make decisions as quickly as possible. Once again, we don't need to tell them. I mean, Friedrich Merz is 100% aware of this, and he's trying to push as quickly as possible. We really know this firsthand, but it takes many people. Yeah.
Yes. You mentioned AI a few times. Perhaps you could deepen that part a little bit, speaking of AI and the impact on society and on businesses. What is actually your best case scenario? What is your worst case scenario looking at AI?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Toni. So I would say my best case is I learned that phrase a couple of days ago when we had a business school training for our executive committee on AI, and there was a good phrase that I like a lot, and that is the best case is if we can use AI to scale intelligence, essentially. So what does that practically mean? It practically means that we can use AI to solve all of those things more intelligently where humans just don't have enough time. Yeah? And with that, create leverage. So, for example, a very specific example, I'm responsible for procurement. So when you apply AI in procurement, it's not about the top 30 procurement contracts you have, because their humans are probably the better ones in managing the partner relationship, the complexities of contractual relations, and so forth. But it's the contracts number 80 to 400 where humans we don't have the capacity to actually work on all of these little things, and where AI is actually good enough right now to pass through contracts, figure out where we can improve, renegotiate, and things like that. So scaling intelligence for me, I mean, that would be the best thing. And the other thing, best case of AI is if it was increasingly a co-thinker type of thing. So, for example, I'm practically using some of these large language models that also we are offering as a company to help me in my daily business. Yeah. So, for example, if I have ideas, I sketch them and describe them, and I'm explicitly saying I'm a board member. That's the issue that I'm working on. A bit anonymized, of course, and then I'm saying this would be my decision. Challenge me, or what's an alternative view on this? So this works fairly well, I have to say. It's you never need to take for granted what that system is saying, but it's just generating alternatives. Yeah, so all of these things are, I think, very positive. Now, if you really ask for the worst case, I mean, the worst case of AI is, I mean, what some popular writers are saying is global extinction, right? Essentially. So, if at some point in time we would pass that point where models will start to rationalize themselves and have their own motivation and drive, then of course we have a different problem. Now, in between, realistically, I think there is a lot of probably fundamental impact happening to society that we need to think about, and that is not clear in my view yet. Yeah. So, what's our future job-private balance? How do we educate young people in jobs, right? So, if you think, for example, about lawyers come into a company or into a law firm still very young, and then they are trained on thousands of contract, pass-throughs and work and so forth. That can be done by AI now, and that raises the question: if you have a young lawyer, how do you train him actually, or her, right? So I think there are many questions. And also questions, what do we recommend to our children, right? I mean, we have a 14-year-old son at home. He's asking me almost every day, Dad, I mean, what's the purpose of doing school or study if AI can do everything? And so the question is, what do we recommend to them? And my recommendation, then I stop on this one, is always to say, look, first of all, the most important thing is to continue to learn how to think, right? I mean, that was also for me the most important output of school and university. And then second one is, of course, always stay up to date. What's going to happen? And then the third thing increasingly is also remaining respectful of physical work, right? Because I mean, these may be the things that are disrupted the last. So, people care, psychological work, services. My son likes race cars a lot, so race car engineering and things like that. Also, all of these kinds are interesting. So, long story short, I think there is a lot happening, and I think the impacts are only starting to shape up.
There is a question from Chiri Chindrak, and I would like to extend that question then. He asks specifically, you mentioned the implications of the Middle East conflict and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. From your perspective, are European corporations proactively managing these risks, or are they largely in a wait-and-see mode? And I would like to extend that question with my questions: are today's boards and top management prepared for this kind of new world in general?
Right. It's a very good question. Thank you very much for that. So on the first one, are they wait and see or managing risks? So I can very strongly reaffirm that all companies I know are very much managing the risks and not in a wait and see mode. Very practically, the issue is, take the example that I had a few minutes ago, if I just made this myth or no thing. So for example, I'm in the supervisory board of a company that is producing tin caps for bottles, right? And these bottles require that material, require methanol to actually close them properly. So what's going to happen now is the company has a working capital of 3 months. So for 3 months, they have enough inventory. And if that closure of the Strait of Hormuz is longer than the 3 months, essentially it's dried out, right? Problem is short term, you cannot replace it. Yeah. And so that company then cannot do anything but close down their factory. And then the bigger follow-up question is, what does the bottle producer do in terms of, very quickly inventing alternatives to that? Because otherwise, then the problem that the nutrition company has is they cannot sell liquids anymore, right? And so long story short, I think the companies are very strongly thinking about that, also about the implications through the value chain. And that company that I mentioned is talking to the whole value chain to jointly figure out what to do. So to avoid that in 6 weeks, there is nothing to drink anymore. Yeah? That's one thing. And the second thing to your question, Tony, are boards prepared? I would say boards, my generation, so to speak, mid-50s, are relatively well prepared for classical problems and problem solving. So I would think that issues such as closing the Strait of Hormuz, that I would still consider it's a complex issue, but it's a classical issue. I think we're relatively well behind that. I think everything that has to do with the dynamics and the exponential dynamics of AI, I think boards are not really prepared, right? And to be quite honest with you, and the only thing we can do is first to familiarize ourselves as quickly as possible, and then second, to be also honest, hire young people that have a natural edge to these kinds of things. Yeah, because things are happening so quickly. I think we are overestimating the short term, but we are completely underestimating the long term, as the saying goes.
Mm-hmm. And what would you recommend then to do with black swans or with the unknown unknowns? How can you prepare for what you do not know, that you don't know?
I think, to be honest, in terms of, that sort of links to leadership, I personally believe I'm not a fan of big, fancy, super modern, different leadership theories or something like that. I think leadership always goes back, in my humble opinion, to fundamentals. Fundamentals are empathy and trust. So in other words, I mean, we need to react very quickly. So we need trust people to do the right things. If not, then we have a people problem. So having empathy, listening to others, having trust, distributing work to those that can do things, also younger board members, for example, maybe, remaining flexible and agile, having situational leadership. Today there are areas where people have fully know what they do, and then you can let them go. There are other areas where people are completely lost right now, and then you need to apply more directional leadership, in my view, and constant learning. So I think it's a cocktail of very classical attributes. I think that is always worth to remind.
Thank you very much, Jens. Time is up, so we have to come to an end, unfortunately. I want to thank you very much for your brilliant insights, for your analysis. We are facing these disruptions all over, and information orientation like this morning is really needed. So thank you very much again. We wish you all the best, and we are hoping to have you again at STARS very soon. Thank you very much again, Jens.
Absolutely. And thank you very much also from my side, and to everybody. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, of course, please feel free to do so. So I'm always interested in networking and in staying connected. Thanks a lot to everybody.
Thank you. We are continuing this webinar series on 7th of May. The speaker will be Jane Plunkett. She is the former Group Chief Risk Officer at AIA in Hong Kong, and today she's advisor to the Group CEO of AIA. Hope to see you then. Goodbye for now, and bon weekend.